Well, hello there, everyone. I am Jennifer Dixon with Eagle's Environmental Support Division, and you are watching along with our MAERS Review webinar for 2022, which is talking about the reporting of the 2022 emissions data that you're going to be submitting in January of 2023. So we're doing this little review webinar, and it is meant for seasoned users of MAERS. So maybe your seasoned user is a year, maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's 10 years. But this is just not really meant for first-time users of MAERS. So we do have a more introductory series of webinars that we're going to be broadcasting in mid-January. We'll give a little bit more information about that a little bit later. But if you've clicked on this video and you are not a seasoned user, please just go to Michigan.gov/MAERS and you'll be able to sign up for those other webinars. And then we'll see you there in January, of course. All right, so we're going to get this party started here. So there's going to be a few of us that you're going to be hearing from today. So like I said, I'm Jennifer Dixon and I work with the Environmental Support Division, but you're also going to be hearing from Amy Haywood and CJ Aslan or Catherine Aslan and Dennis McGee. And the three of them work in Eagle's Air Quality Division. So they're kind of your main core team when it comes to MAERS and getting MAERS questions answered and facilitating a lot of the data and things like that. So they're going to be here with us today to talk through the webinar in certain aspects. So, and hopefully it will make it so that it's a little bit less boring for you all to watch anyway. I mean, that's kind of the point. We don't necessarily want to bore you. We want to get through this pretty fast. So there's a few materials that are going to be really helpful as you start through working on your MAERS. And this is just a little bit of a reminder for those of you who've done it before. You probably have accessed these in the past, but just want to remind you that they are out there and they are really helpful. So when you're getting started with MAERS, you're going to want to just grab that checklist, remind yourself of all the things that you're going to need when you start working on your report. You're also going to probably want to access that frequently asked questions document. So we have that. This one is the one from the last year. We haven't updated it yet because some of the changes that we're suggesting that folks do for this reporting year are documented in another part of the website that we really wanted to highlight. And we can talk about that later. But again, that's at that Michigan.gov/MAERS. And you're going to just want to click in that update section. You'll be able to see that really easily. Of course, the MAERS user guide does have the most up-to-date information. We actually just put out the most updated version of this year's user guide. Oh man, I want to say it was just a couple of days ago. So we try to update that as soon as we can because we want you all to have the best information that you can once you get started. So where can you go for help? You're going to hear this probably a lot. And if you attend those other sessions, you're definitely going to be hearing it. And that's just using our info.maers at Michigan.gov email address. So this is the most beneficial place that you can go to get information. If you've used those other resources that I just mentioned and you still can't find the answers, please feel free to send us an email and we get back to you as soon as we possibly can. So what are we going to be talking about today? So we're going to be talking at a very high level. We're not going to be digging deep into any of this stuff, but we are going to be giving you this really broad overview of MAERS and the reporting that we do in general. So we're going to quick go over registration. Adding users is always one of our biggest questions that we get. So even though that might seem rudimentary to people, we are going to be going over that because it really is the thing we get asked about a lot. We're going to talk a little bit about navigating in the system. So as an experienced user, you should be pretty familiar with that. But since we only do this really once a year, it's always great to have a little bit of a, update and overview, kind of building that muscle memory back up again. We're going to talk about submitting. And so Amy is going to submit an actual report so you can see and be refreshed that it can be done. And then we are going to have CJ talk a little bit about control pathways. And we're not going to dig deep into any of these things again, but we are going to be talking about them in a very broad sense. We also will give you some reminders on tools that might improve your MAERS experience. We want you to just have that increased awareness of why we're doing this and why we make everybody do this every year in general. So what are we going to discuss? I'm going to be talking to you about why we do MAERS. So I know we'll probably hear this every year if you participate in these review webinars, but it really is important to understand that we're not asking folks to do this for fun. We know that this can be a big task, and we want you to just understand that MAERS and the data that we collect is very important, and accuracy of that data is also very important because it's used in so many different ways. We're going to talk about how MAERS works. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a broad sense, and then you're going to hear a little bit from Amy, you're going to hear a little bit from CJ about kind of how MAERS works. So we're going to intersperse some of that in there after we kind of talk about the main sections of it. We're going to show you how to log into the system. So as a reminder, we're going to be logging into like a training environment. So it's going to look a little bit different than the real MAERS. We're going to talk about helpful tools, obviously, and then we're going to highlight some of the pieces that you're going to need to be able to complete the forms in a way that's easy for you. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the changes that we're asking folks to do this year that are going to help it be a little bit easier for you next year when we move over to that new system in MyEnviro portal. We again are going to talk about how you would submit. We're going to talk about reports that you can get out of the system if you need those. Again, we're going to talk about those control pathways really quickly, go over a few resources, and then we're not going to get to questions because I want you to bring your questions to the webinars that we're going to be talking about in January, or you can always use that info MAERS at Michigan.gov. All right, so let's talk a little bit about why we do MAERS. MAERS is a tool that the Air Quality Division uses to manage the inventory of the annual air emissions in Michigan. So this is a broad-based tool that we use for lots of different things. So we have been asking in the last few years, approximately 1,700 stationary sources to submit an emissions report annually. So the emissions that you report, they become part of the public domain, and they are used in a lot of decision-making processes, which is really, really important. So we look at these at a site level, a local level, a regional, state, and federal level. You've probably seen this data integrated into some other like GIS type of platforms and things like that. So we use the data to identify trends in emissions. It can assist in identifying potential for additional cost-effective reductions. We can look at the effectiveness of this program in different ways too once we have this data. So it's a really interesting tool for us, but it's also something that EPA requires us to ask you for. So if you ever have any questions on why you have to do this, again, just let us know. We're definitely happy to talk about it a little bit more. And I do like to show this slide. I know folks have seen this before, but it's just something that in a way, it just shows all the positive work that has gone on, not just by Eagle and us by any other name that we've been called in the past, but also by industry in ways that they have utilized better control equipment, changed materials to be less polluting and things like that over the years. It just really shows that our emissions in Michigan are downward trending, and they continue to be more incrementally now than they were, in the very beginning of the air quality rules and regulations, but it's still a positive thing that we always want to make sure that we really focus on. All right, so now that we have an idea of why you all are doing MAERS, I do want to talk about how MAERS works, and I'm going to pass it over to Amy in just a second, but we're going to start very, very generally, and then we'll add some more details as the presentation progresses. So, and remember that because this is designed for folks with experience, if you find any holes in this presentation or things that we don't cover that you wish we would, reach out to us. So Amy, whenever you're ready, if you want to go ahead and unmute and just let me know when you want me to advance the slides for you.
Thank you, Jennifer. You can advance. How does MAERS work? MAERS, sources that are expected to report emissions annually, the system will send up to 3 email notifications, and we start that in January. If you confirm receipt of the first email you receive, you will not receive further email notifications. If you do not confirm receipt of the email, whether it's emails 1, 2, 3, or 4, you'll be sent a letter towards the end of January. And once you receive the notification that reporting season has started, you can begin working on your report. Next. Primary preparers can begin logging in once they receive that notification, and they will assign additional users to the source. This means other users, other registered users in the MAERS system, if they need access to your source data, primary preparers can log in and grant them that access. And the reports are due every year on March 15th. How does MAERS work? MAERS is a calculator. It calculates emissions based on the activity of the emission unit or emission units. The US EPA determines a source classification code, or SCC, that describes activities. The type of material, the unit, and emission factors are associated with the SCC. Depending on the SCC you choose and the material throughput you enter, MAERS will calculate the amount of emissions for an emission unit. If you provide control equipment information with control efficiencies, MAERS will also take this into consideration when it makes its calculations. Next. Accessing MAERS. The best way to access MAERS is to go to our MAERS webpage at www.Michigan.gov/MAERS. There are 2 links on our webpage. Their button, go to MAERS facility login, is at the top right, and then at the lower part of the MAERS webpage under Get Started, there's a MAERS facility web portal link. Either of these will take you directly to the login page. When you register for your MAERS user account, you need to select a MAERS role. There's 4 different roles you can choose from. The first one is primary preparer. Every facility must have a primary preparer user role in order to submit their report. The primary preparer, as we talked about a few seconds ago, associates other registered users to the source data, and they're the only user role that can submit the report. It doesn't mean they have to prepare their report or make edits, but it does mean they have to submit it. So the name primary preparer is a little bit misleading because they do not have to be the preparer of the report, but they do have to be the submitter. The primary preparer must work directly for the company. You cannot hire an outside source to submit your MAERS report for you. The second role that you can select is a secondary preparer. This user must also be a direct employee of the source, and this user can edit and view the report, but they do not have access to the submit button. Only the primary preparer can submit the report. I will repeat that a lot through this presentation, but that is because it is one of the biggest thing we get questions on, and it causes a lot of confusion for users. So we just keep tending to repeat it, and hopefully it becomes less confusing as time goes on. The consultant user role has the same access as a secondary preparer. They can edit and view the report. They can complete the report for you, but they cannot submit it. A consultant is someone you would hire to work on your MAERS report, but once they've completed it, they would notify the primary preparer for the source, and then the primary preparer would log on and verify the accuracy of the data and submit the report. The reviewer user role can only view the report. This may be somebody you know in the industry or anybody within your company or outside of your company that you want to grant access to view a report to look it over for you, but they cannot make any edits. So we talked a little bit about the registration as for your user role. I'm not sure why we're on this slide, Jennifer. Okay, just one second. If you're, okay, sorry, I apologize. I got a little lost there for a second.
No, you're totally fine.
If your facility, once you're registered for a user account, you don't have to register again every year. If your facility name has changed or your email has changed, we ask that you do create a new user account, and we'll close the old one, and all of your access will be under your new email account. Emails for registered users have to be unique, and so once the email or facility name changes, you need to create a new user account. If you are a secondary preparer for your company and you need to become the primary preparer, you can just submit the electronic signature agreement form. You do not need to register for a new user account. Okay. So I think that's it on user accounts and registration, Jennifer, and I'm ready to log into the system.
Yeah, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay. So I'm already logged into the MAERS system, and it's the training system. We have a few users who will look at this URL in the webinar recording and try to create a user account on the training system. And the system will let you, but I will never see it or activate your user account. So please do not use this training URL to create your user account. You'll want to go to the MAERS webpage and access the facility login page that way to create your user account if you don't already have one. But I am already logged in. And one thing I want to point out that we had a pretty big issue with last reporting season was users having difficulty logging in because of their browser settings. There's an autofill settings on your browser. So when you come to the login page, your username and your password will be pre-populated for you, and you can just click login. Many systems are agreeable to these settings and they allow you to use that feature on your browser. MAERS is not very agreeable to that. It does not like it when the username and password are pre-populated. It can cause a lot of issues with logging in. People can't log in, and it causes a lot of problems trying to figure out how to log in. So if you come to the user login page and your username and your password are already pre-populated, please just delete them and manually type it in anyways before you log in, and you shouldn't have any issues if you do that. So now that we're logged in, we're just going to go over a quick navigation of MAERS. If you're a seasoned user, you should be pretty familiar with the tabs and how to gain access to your MAERS report. You do that by clicking on MAERS report, and please excuse the training system. It's a little slow and it kicked me out. So I was logged in for too long. Apologize about that. So to access the MAERS report, you click on the MAERS report tab, and your current year MAERS report that you have access to should be listed here in a format, and you would click view edit to gain access to the report. Before we do that, we're going to go to the systems utilities tab. There is some reference data in MAERS that the MAERS uses for calculations and different codes that you'll see throughout the different tabs. And if you need to reference these, this is where you find them. Sometimes it may help you while you're doing your permitting, or if you have the need or the urge to look up the MAERS tables, here they are. But this is where the primary preparers will go to associate your source data to other registered users so they can access and view or work on your report. You'll click on Manage Users, you'll click Associate User, you'll enter their email address that they use to register for their user account. You'll click Search. The system will bring up the user, and you'll click Associate Found Users. And you're not done. This just brings up the user information. You need to click View Edit paper pencil icon at the bottom next to the user. And then you need to click on the Associate Facilities tab. In production, the system that you will use, this box right here, Associate, the checkbox is not checked. In the training environment, it's pre-checked, but you will need to click that little box to make a check mark there, and then use the drop down under user role to click either Preparer for secondary preparer or Reviewer access, and then you'll click Save. Once you click Save, the system will send the registered user an email that they are associated and they can log in and see the data. But until the primary preparer does that, the secondary preparers or consultant or reviewer users cannot see your data unless they are associated to it. I'll go over the My Account tab really quick because this is where you will create your PIN or select new security questions if you forgot them from the previous year. In order to reset your PIN or select and answer new security questions, you need to click this blue button, Request Access Code. When you click this button, the system will send you a 6-digit access code. It is a security access code that the system sends you. It is not a PIN. Some users get that confused and they try to enter that security code as their PIN and they still can't submit the report. So the system emails you an access code. You enter the access code in this field. You do not have to enter your old password and new password unless you want to change it. While the fields are presented, if you want to use them, there's no requirement to reset all of the security data just because you requested an access code. So if the only thing you want to do is reset your PIN, you will request the access code, check your email, enter the access code, create your PIN, enter it a second time. You can also skip the security questions if you know your answers already, and you click Save My Account. This is sort of important because we still get a lot of users asking us to send them a PIN or asking them what their PIN is, and we can't do that. So now let's get into the MAERS report. We're going to click View Edit next to the report we want to work on. Next to Current Year MAERS report. And this is where the training environment is a little bit slower, hopefully, than the production environment. Hopefully production doesn't take this long. Now you're in your MAERS report. These tabs under MAERS report data entry, source through completeness check are what consists of your MAERS report. Those are the tabs you'll be working on. Any field with a red asterisk is required. Any carrots over here on these fields give you drop downs. This is all pretty simple navigation, hopefully, and you're used to and accustomed to doing in MAERS if you're a seasoned user. The biggest thing I like to point out during this on the source tab is the shared draft MAERS report with the AQD staff over at the far right of the screen. There's a checkbox there. If you click it and scroll down and click Save Source, this allows the AQD staff to see your draft while you're working on it, especially if you call on the phone and you require assistance. We can't see your draft report until you do this. And to unshare it, you can click the box again and click Save again. And then we can no longer see it again after you do that. The Contact tab is pretty important. We have the emissions inventory contact primary and a secondary contact. The primary contact is required. Something I'd like to point out here is the contact information may be different than the preparer or user information. An update to user accounts or user information does not update contact information and vice versa. An update to this contact information does not affect user information. There are two completely different things in MAERS. So just because you're the new user, maybe the new primary preparer, doesn't mean that you might, doesn't mean that you're the contact. Somebody else at your facility may be the contact, and it doesn't update this. So if you created your new user account and you also are the contact, you'll have to update that information here as well. A secondary contact is not required. We do appreciate this information in the event that the system attempts to email this primary email and it comes back as undelivered. We love to have this second email in there so that we can reach out to somebody and ask them who the new contact is. But the emission inventory contact primary and the fee invoice contact are both required. And I think that's it for me. I'm going to turn it back over to Jen, and I think she'll get into some of the other functions of MAERS as she demonstrates the rest of it for you.
Yep, I definitely will do that. So this is pretty much the same window that we were just looking at with Amy. So just kind of letting you know, we're just moving on. So she just talked to you guys about the source and contact tabs over here, and then we're going to go right to the stack tab. And you don't have to do them in this order. You can do them in whatever order you want. And you don't have to do your report all at once. Just as a reminder, you can come and go as you please. Just make sure you use the save button as much as possible. So stack is a little bit different this year, or at least our conversation around it's going to be a little bit different this year than it has been in past years. Just because we want you to prepare as best you can to move over to the new system for January 2024. So a couple of things to remember when it comes to like, do I put a stack in my MAERS report or not? That's something that we would really encourage you to put it in there if it's in a permit. Definitely do that. If you have it in a permit, just get it in MAERS if it's not already in there. That's going to be really, really important. And one of the main reasons that we're requiring that is because if you don't give us a stack, and so you're telling us basically that your emissions are, coming out the sides of your building, they're coming out windows, they're considered fugitive instead of being a point source on the stack. So they're just looked at differently in those ways when we talked about earlier, the why MAERS. So all the other things that this MAERS data is used for and the emission inventory data is used for, if we're telling everybody that there's so many emissions coming out at ground level, that's very different than us telling everybody that emissions are going up into the atmosphere and being dispersed before they get down to where people are in the breathing zone. So just keep that in mind. Encourage you again, put every stack that you can in your MAERS report. So a couple things just to go over when it comes to navigation. So Amy talked about this a second ago, but this little paper and pencil means that you want to edit whatever this piece of information is. So if we want to edit the boiler stack, we would click that. If we want to delete the boiler stack, we would click the delete button. If we wanted to add a new stack, which hopefully some of you will be doing, you're going to use this yellow button. So those buttons are fairly similar throughout all the different tabs. So just kind of keep that in mind. So first, what I want to do is I do want to and we're doing things in this system that don't make sense, and that's okay, because we're not going to go through step by step and correct all of the completeness check errors, which I'm going to show you in just a second, because that would take us forever, and this is the review webinar. So when we get to the actual training in January, we'll dig a little bit deeper into this stuff. And when Amy shows how to submit a report in a few minutes, we're going to do that with a clean report that we've done all the right things to, and it's good to go. So what I like to do when I start to get into the sort of nitty gritty of filling out a MAERS submittal is to first run my completeness check. And what that does is it tells you, like, obviously you have all of these things that you still need to correct. So what I like to do is go to the MAERS report sitemap, and that's going to show you all the different places where you have red errors. So remember, red means you have to fix it to move forward. Yellow means that you should fix it. We'd love it if you'd fix it, but if you don't fix it, you'll probably still be able to submit your report. So if it's March 15th at midnight, just get us those yellow errors, and we'll deal with it. So as a reminder, the little plus sign is going to expand your piece that you're looking at. If you hover over it, it will tell you what the problem is. So it'll tell you what information is missing. So that just might help you as you're gathering information and trying to get things ready for expediency. Same thing here in our emission unit portion. We have a lot of red errors, which, like I said, we're not going to correct all of those today. All right, so let's get back to that stack report. I want to just go over a couple things. Let's just say that we know that this coding booth 1 it's been removed and we need to delete it. It was removed a long time ago. We don't need this coding booth anymore. It's really like this ancillary thing that we've been putting zeros in for a couple of years. We thought maybe we'd use it again, but we don't. We've never hooked it back up. And it's never operated in this reporting year. So we just want to go ahead and delete it. And I just want to run you through the deletion process. So we're going to go ahead and delete that stack. It's going to ask us if that stack has been physically removed or rendered permanently inoperable in this reporting year. And then we can say yes, or we can say no. So if we say yes, then we say that it shouldn't be deleted because maybe there was emissions from it this year. We know there wasn't. So we're going to just go ahead and say no here. And then we're going to delete the record, just to kind of show you how easy that is. The system does want you to verify that you really don't need that data. So just be thoughtful in that. If you even used that piece of equipment in January and you had some emissions coming out of that stack, then you certainly wouldn't want to delete it this year. Deleting is for things that are over a year old or things that, you know, you haven't used for a while. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's add a new stack. And we're just going to call this SB stack because we don't really have a name, and I just kind of want to go through some of these starred fields for you so you can just get that familiarity back again. The stack description, although it's not starred, it's really important, especially if you have a lot of stacks for similar things. It's great to be able to say exactly what that stack is for. That helps you, that helps us, it helps your inspector when they're looking at it and they're saying, did they remember to put this stack on? Oh yeah, there, it's right there. You want to make sure that it's your actual height above ground level. So remember how your permits might say at least 30 feet high. Well, if your stack is 40 feet high, then please put 40 feet there, not 30 feet. Same thing with your diameters and things like that. Make sure that those are actual numbers. This is a great opportunity to sort of inventory what's in MAERS and what you have, because again, once we transfer that data over next year, that accuracy is going to be even more important. And I don't want to say that we ever looked at MAERS in sort of a laissez-faire way, but I feel like based on kind of how we're going and the requirements of the new system, MAERS might seem laissez-faire looking back into the past. So we just want to make sure that everybody's feeling really comfortable with the data that they have in there this year. All right, so we're just going to go ahead and save this. It's going to let me know that I didn't put anything in here that I really needed, but that's okay, because remember, we can always work in this later and we can, you know, come back to it whenever we want. All right, so let's go to that emission unit form. So one of the first things you're going to notice is this is set up very similar to the stack form. You see your view edit icons on the left, you see your delete on the right, you see add new emission unit on the bottom. So very similar process to editing things, getting rid of things, all of that stuff. So what we first want to do with this is the same thing that we kind of did with the stacks, is you want to look at this list and you want to say, is this list complete? Did you get a new permit this year that you have new things to add? One of the things that we have been talking about to get ready for our transfer over to my Enviro portal is making sure that these emission unit IDs that you have in here exactly line up with what your permit says. Because our systems are going to be talking to each other, that's going to be really, really important. And we'll point out where you can watch a quick video on how to do that or what you should do to do that. We're not going to run through that in the review webinar, but we'll dig into that a little deeper in some of the other webinars in January. But just to keep that in mind, make sure those things line up. We've always kind of talked about that, just because from an inspector standpoint, when they're out, they want to be able to say, did you report everything that you were supposed to? Are you hitting on those emission units that are in your permits? And again, the emission unit description is another really important part of this, because your inspector wants to know, does that description line up with what's in your permit? That's really, really important. So just as an example, let's go ahead and look at EU boiler here. And again, we're not going to go through a bunch of these, but just very high level. So EU boiler in this case, there's definitely things that are in the starred fields that we know should be corrected. Like for instance, we know a boiler is a boiler. It's not an unclassified emission unit type. So we're just going to want to go ahead in here and make sure that we actually change that to boiler. That's going to be really, really important. We want to make sure these installation dates are correct. So especially if your permit says that this boiler was installed in 1991, then you want to make sure that this says it was installed in 1991. So those kinds of things. You want to make sure this emission unit description is exacting. So if this is a 100 million BTU boiler, you want to make sure it says 100 million BTU. Is it only gas fired, or does it have dual fuel capabilities? Again, you're just going to want to detail that out. The capacity information, some emission units are going to ask you these questions and some aren't. Depending on how you answer this first question, it will open up some of these other questions that will be required. Another really important part of all of the emission unit emission units that you have in MAERS is talking about the permit applicability. So this is going to be really important too. Is the unit grandfathered but still need to be reported? So grandfathered, as a reminder, is anything installed and not modified or reconstructed prior to August 15th, 1967. So we're just talking to some of our new hires at our Air Quality Division Rule School and talking about this. And I think some of them were kind of like, is that really a thing? 1967 was so long ago, like it's probably older maybe than some of their parents, things like that. So, but yeah, I mean, that is still a thing. So just be cognizant of that. You might have some, or maybe yours was grandfathered, but because you did do some modification or reconstruction, it no longer is. So you want to make sure that if it is Rule 201 exempt, and you say yes here, that you can tell us what rule number your piece of equipment is using. So what is the exemption rule that it's using? And if it's permitted, you want to be able to tell us what permit it's in. Again, the control device is really, really important here. If you have a control device, take credit for it. If you, and make sure it's the right one. So like in this case, we know the wet suppression is not the right one. This boiler probably likely has low NOx burners, so we can go ahead and put those in there if I can find them quickly. I just saw them. Yes, here we go. Those low NOx burners in there. Sometimes in training, if I try to delete this, it's going to break the system. So we're just going to pretend that we deleted that one because we know that's no wet suppression on a boiler there. Another important part is include your stacks, right? So you want to make sure that if it's more than one stack, it's on there. Use that little plus sign again to just add a stack if there is one. We don't necessarily have another one for this emission unit, but that's how you're going to walk through all your emission units. So maybe you have 5 emission units, maybe you have 10, maybe you have 100, but it does makes sense just to take that cursory look. Hopefully you won't have as many issues as we had in this boiler example, but you do want to use that thought process as you really look for these. So there's a couple ways for us to get back to our list. We can click this back arrow here, or we can go over here again and click the emission unit tab on the side, and it's going to get us right back to this information. So one other thing I want to just show you really quickly is how to dismantle something, or why you would use a dismantle date. So we're going to use this secondary paint line as an example. So we're not going to look at any of the other errors. I know there's other errors in here, but dismantle date, unlike deleting, dismantle date is going to be used for something that you used in this reporting year. So we would have maybe used this up until June 2022, but after that, we got rid of it. We didn't want it anymore. So let's just put in here 6/1, if I can type, which I totally can. There we go, 6/1/2022. We're going to put that date in there. And then when we save this emission unit, what's going to happen is, and this is going to be, of course, weird because it's from last year's version. So let's try 2021 and see if it lets us do that, just so I can show you guys. And we can try that maybe. No, just doesn't like me today. It's fine. Let's just say it was June of 2022. No big deal. When we get back to our emission unit screen, we're going to see a date that's going to pop up in this here. And what that's going to tell MAERS, and it kind of won't matter for this year, but it's going to tell, hopefully when we transfer things over, that you don't want to see that emission unit again. You're not using it anymore. So hopefully it won't even pop up in the new system. So those were some of the things that I wanted to make sure we went over for the emission unit form. I'm going to quickly go through the reporting group form, because this is another one that there is definitely changes that we would really encourage you to make this year with your MAERS report. That's hopefully will make your life a lot easier next year. And just to recognize that we have heard some frustrations from people on this sort of general guidance that we've given out to get rid of your reporting groups. There will not be, and I'm going to repeat that, there will not be reporting groups allowed in the new system. So that's why changing this now is going to be really important. We have been talking about some circumstances that may allow multiple things to be included as one emission unit, but right now we're kind of talking about what cases that might be, and we haven't detailed that information yet. So more on that to come. What I would say is if you have reporting groups in your permit and you have questions specifically, please send them to info.maers@Michigan.gov. What I would like to see is I have permit number, blah, 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 and I'm created RG, blah, blah, blah. And this is my situation. This is my activity. You know, this is what we do. Should this be turned into an emission unit with multiple things in it, or should we be reporting these all separately? And you'll understand a little bit more what I'm talking about in a minute. But that's what I would really prefer, because we're trying to get a sense of who's going to really have challenges with doing some of these, and which instances it might make sense and which ones it might not. So for this one, this is a perfect example of one that we do need to get rid of. So this is called RG ovens and boilers. And the reason this was created in the first place was it took all the natural gas fired equipment at the facility and it lumped it all together. It made it for a lot easier reporting, but the problem is that separately, these don't really have the same necessarily emission factors and things like that. And the system won't necessarily allow it. So all we're going to do with this one, well, first I want to show you something. So if you hop over to your activity and emissions tab here, this is going to give you all of your IDs regarding what you need to report emissions for. So here's that RG right here, RG oven and ovens and boiler. This is the one that we want to break up. And I want you to just really look at how this looks right now. And then I'm going to show you it again after we get rid of that reporting group. So right now you see RG ovens, boilers. Let's hop back to that reporting group tab. We're going to tell it to delete this. I know that's scary, but it's okay. It's just, now it's gone. So like magic, when we go to the activity and emissions tab, all those pieces of information, there's your ovens, there's your boilers. So these were the three, these two ovens and this boiler were the ones that were formed up in that reporting group. So once we delete that reporting group, it basically just breaks it up into the emission units that you had created in the first place. And then you'll just report those activities and emissions separately. Another question, especially about things like this, is like, well, okay, Jennifer, you're saying that, but I still only get one natural gas bill. I can't really tell you exactly how many millions of BTUs of natural gas went to the boiler and one went to this oven or this oven. We understand that, we recognize that. And so what we would really encourage folks to do is to use your best judgment, your best guess, your best estimate. And I know that's not very scientifically correct, but do the best you can with parsing that out. And then just include as a piece of your supplemental information, your justification or how you did that. And again, we'll hopefully be able to get a little bit more into that when we have our webinars in January, but we don't want people to be too stressed out about, you know, a little bit of natural gas here or there. Where did it go? Where did it go to? So this is a great example of that. So let's look at these activities and emissions now. So what I would like to do is just show you a few things on a couple of these that we have already in here. So let's go ahead. I want to look at one of these coding lines. So I'm going to go look at EU Code 1, and we're going to just click on that edit button. I think it's thinking. Yes, it's thinking. It's thinking about whether or not it wants to talk about coding today. So that always happens. Okay, so EU Code 1. In this case, we don't have an SCC code in here, but you are going to want to make sure that your SCC codes are appropriate, that they make sense for what is in there. And this is something that's caught people up before. If you look at it and it is either not there anymore because things have changed, it's different, it doesn't make sense, you want to add a new one, a new emission unit, and then you want to go in and delete the old one. So always add new first, delete old second. And I don't even know if this is going to let me add one because it has It's kind of grayed out, but this is how you find your SEC code. If you don't know it, it's very easy to do. For coding, we're just going to look at industrial processes. So these little plus signs are going to open little drop downs. Oops, sorry, click too many times. And then we're just going to make sure that we're looking up our, what exactly we're doing with this process. And I'm just going to click something randomly because we're just showing an example here. And our MAERS is thinking very hard today. There we go. And you'll see as we break this down, it's just going to get into more detailed information. Once you get down to where it's going to be blue, you just want to make sure that these units are how you report your information. So if it says tons, do you report in tons? Sometimes you might see, especially with coatings, and I know we're not in the coatings one, but you might see coatings and gallons, or coatings and gallons, tons and gallons. So if you report your usage in tons, perfect. If you report your usage in gallons, then you're going to want to make sure you pick gallons. Sometimes you don't have a choice, and so you're going to have to do your own conversion. But if there's a choice, you just want to make sure that you choose the right one. So then once I chose that one, it just pre-filled it in here. This source classification code description is just another opportunity to say, did I choose right? Obviously, I didn't choose right in this one, but we're just going to accept that it's okay. So when you get down to this section right here, if you can just put in your percentages of information that, or information of times when you're using that piece of equipment. And the reason this is important is because some processes are seasonal. So we just want to make sure that we're capturing that to the best of our ability. And then this is where you're going to put in your material throughput. So since we're reporting this in tons, we're going to just put in 2,000 tons. Sometimes you'll have to put this other information in. For coatings, it's sometimes good to put in, your percent by weight. Maybe you're going to put your density in here too. Things like that might be helpful for your process. So then once you get that all done, you're going to just save that activity information. And then you'll see that it starts to populate all of that up here. And again, if we go back to our mission unit and reporting group, we're going to see that we have some more information in that section right here. So this is, the process kind of works exactly the same. So let's go ahead and go back to that, view edit. And we're going to go ahead and look at the other tabs within this form. So this form, the activities and missions form, has 3 different tabs. It has your activity detail, which we already just kind of talked about. And then we have your emissions tab and your attachment tab. So right now what we want to do is we want to be able to go to your emissions tab. So once we click on the emissions tab, we're going to see that source classification code pre-loaded some pollutants into here. So these pollutants are the ones that are criteria pollutants that are required to be reported by MAERS. So just remember that if you have an SEC that has pollutants preloaded, those are the ones that are required to be reported to MAERS. You might have other ones. So please, if you do, you want to go ahead and add those in. And I can show you how to do that here too. So to add a new pollutant, you're just going to click that plus sign. It's going to give you an empty bar here. And again, I'm not going to pick one that's actually real because I just kind of want to show you. And we're going to add in the ones that are appropriate. For any that you add in, you will have to choose your own emissions basis, and MAERS emission factor, probably isn't going to be a thing because you're adding it. So we're just going to do mass balance, and we're just going to do 1 and 1 here. So we have something to do. So now once we're ready, we're going to tell MAERS like, hey, calculate my emissions, MAERS. And it's going to calculate your emissions over here. Again, we're not going to see anything for this mass balance because we told it we don't want it to calculate for us. If we think these numbers are fine, we can go ahead and just click these boxes over here, and then it's going to move the number over here. And this is the number, this is the column, these annual emission that need to be filled out all the way by the time you save this emission unit information in order for MAERS to be happy with you. So let's just say our NOx was 4,000 pounds, just for grins. And we'll say that this is fine. And we'll say that for our VOC, let's just say in this one, we had a 50% control efficiency. So remember in this one, we're putting an actual number, not a decimal. So don't put 0.5 if you really mean 50. All right, I'm going to tell it to calculate my emissions again because I've put in a new number there, and you're going to see that that changed. We'll say that's good, and then we'll go ahead and save it. And now we've got all these nice green check marks over here. We're good to go. So that's how you're going to do your emissions tab within this form. So you're going to go through those activities. Sometimes for a emission unit, you might have more than one activity. So like I said earlier, if you have a dual fuel boiler where you have natural gas and diesel, both of those activities are going to show up. You're going to have a different source classification code for each fuel. You're going to have to fill out information for each of those. And then the last tab that's on this form is your attachment. So remember how we talked about, when you're parsing out natural gas usage for ovens, space heaters, boilers, things like that, that you normally maybe would have submitted together. This is where you're going to put that justification. Do you do mass balance for your calculation method? This is where you're going to attach that information. Do you want to use stack test data as your basis for calculating your emission? Then we're going to want that summary page. So if you are using the same spreadsheet for a lot of different emission units, you don't have to attach it 5 times, just attach it 1 time. Just put in the description using for emissions for emission unit, blah, 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 whatever. And make sure you just detail that in there. It just makes it easier for your inspector to know what the heck you were doing on there. So let's say that we, did all of those kinds of things, and we went through and we looked at all of these activities and emissions, and we ended up filling in all of this information, and we had this table completely full. There really isn't a lot of other stuff that you have to do in MAERS besides submit your report, which is awesome. Again, what I always say is you can run your completeness check often. You should do that, especially when you think you're at the end and you feel like you totally have it. Then you're going to want to run that completeness check, because guaranteed you probably missed one red thing. It's going to pop up and let you know, hey, you missed this. We want to make sure that we get right to that. I want to make sure that I'm not missing anything. I think I'm going to get it back to Amy so that she can show us how to submit this. But just as you're watching this, if things come up, questions come up, definitely, again, reach out to that info MAERS@Michigan.gov. Amy, you want to go ahead and share your screen over mine whenever you want, and then we can go ahead and show these guys how to submit a real report, since that one that I was working in could never have been submitted, correct?
Correct, Jennifer. Thank you.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, so Jennifer probably, if she would have clicked completeness check, she would have still had a lot of errors. One thing that we'd like to point out is when you complete those errors or fill in those fields that are errors, you have to click completeness check again to clear them out. If you don't click completeness check before you're ready to submit, the system will think you still have errors. It doesn't know that you filled in that data. It doesn't know to look for those fields again until you actually click the button to tell it to. So now this source passes completeness check. It's ready to be submitted. Only the primary preparer user can submit the report. As a primary preparer, I'm the only one who has access to this submit button. The submit button is another tab over here that has tabs, more tabs within it. It has the submittal authorization tab, and that is where you go to submit your report. Your information should appear here. You have to enter your PIN, answer your security question, check the box that you understand you're saying all this data is the true to the best of your knowledge, and you click submit. The system will ask you if you're sure. You click OK. Of course you're sure you're ready to submit this and not look at it again for a very long time. And then the system will send you an email saying it's been submitted, and it will pop up submitted successfully on your screen. You can also click over on the copy of record tab, and it gives you a timestamp of the submitted report. And you can view your submitted report by clicking on this view report button. And that's about it as far as submittal goes. Jennifer, I think you're going to go over the reports.
Yep, I sure am. So you are in, just to be clear, you are in Z9333, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I want to get to the one that you just submitted, because that one is going to actually show me things, where the one that I was in isn't going to show me anything because I didn't submit it and it had so many errors. So we just want to really quick go through a couple of the reports that can be really valuable when you are working in MAERS. And so one thing that I don't know, and maybe we'll have to get to this later, this might be part of like our frequently asked questions or things like that once we get there, is what kind of reports will we be able to get out of the new system, and how will we get those? I feel like we're going to have a little training session just with that once we get back into that system. So, all right, a couple things down here under report management. This right here where you see print MAERS report. So if you click that, it is literally going to print every form that you filled out. It's going to be multiple pages. Most people don't necessarily do that. You can save it to a PDF if that's helpful somehow, but just remember your information is in MAERS, so you don't necessarily need that. But let's check out these other reports. I'm going to go over some of them that I think are particularly helpful, and at least when I was an inspector, they helped me be able to look at what folks were doing. Something that's interesting is this, the emission comparison one, the source totals report. So this isn't going to compare like your last year's to this year's or anything like that. What it is going to show you is your source reported emissions versus your AQD calculated emissions. So you're going to see in this one, they're the same, but sometimes they might not be. You might have told us that you calculated all of your VOCs based on mass balance. And so that's not going to be the same information. So you're just going to, it's going to be just an interesting one for you to check on for sure. There's some other ones in here that are also really interesting that you might want to check out, like your additions report. So if you did get a new permit, clicking on your additions report might be really helpful to be able to see, did I actually add all of my emission units, things like that. You can also look at your emission unit totals, which is going to be really interesting too. It's going to show you based on, if you think about that, maybe you did give us a spreadsheet for mass balance, that's going to show you when I did my mass balance calculations and I submitted my information with my Excel spreadsheet or whatever way you did that, did those line up? Did you do it right? It's just kind of another way for you to do a check and balance if that is helpful for you. And then you can save these as PDFs, you can print them, whatever you want to do. So just kind of want to make sure people know that these reports are there. They can be really helpful as well. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the presentation really quick. All right, so Amy, can you just let me know if you can see the presentation?
Right now, Jen, I can still see MAERS.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I'm just going to stop sharing and then share my presentation here. Sometimes it works, Zoom works great, and sometimes it doesn't. So,
I can see it good now.
All right, perfect. Okay, so I'm going to just go ahead and do this for a second. All right. Okay, so one of the most important things that we want to do when we're working in MAERS is we want to double check our information. So I think you heard me kind of talk about that earlier when we were talking about the lists of information that you have in there, your installation dates, all of those kinds of things. You want to make sure that that information is current. Is it complete? Is it accurate? That's going to be one of the things that we really want to make sure you're focusing on, as well as adding those things that maybe weren't in there before, like your stacks. getting rid of those reporting groups like we talked about, ensuring that your mission unit names are the same as in your current permits, things like that. Some resources that we've talked about, but I want to just mention again, the main website for MAERS is Michigan.gov/MAERS. All of the information we've talked about today, this recording of the other training modules is going to be on there. Those little videos and other help to get ready for the next year are all on there. So check that out. If you can't find your answers, please feel free to email info.maers@michigan.gov. You can also call the Environmental Assistance Center at 800-662-9278. And always your district inspector is a really great resource for you. So that being said, we're going to shift gears a little bit. I'm going to pass this over to CJ so she can talk about the supplemental control templates and things like that. So CJ, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and share over and take it away. Oh, and we lost you there for a second. I think you're still on mute, but it did look good.
Yeah, so it let me share and then didn't let me unmute myself. So that's not good. So let me just flip back to where I was supposed to be in that
Try that again.
presentation. Okay, now I need to share. Okay, hopefully you're seeing the presentation now.
Yep, that looks good.
Okay, so I am going to be talking about control pathways, and some of you are going to be shaking your heads because I know that this is still new and can still be a little nerve-wracking, but it's getting better and better every year. So I'm going to start with just a little history to remind everybody where we came from, why we're doing this. Late spring of 2020, the EPA announced that they were going to be doing changes. These changes were meant to better describe how controls relate to each other and how the emissions flow from the generation to the outlet. So in MAERS, and you will have seen this as we went through the screens, what you notice is that when you put a control code and a stack on an emission unit, it's just attached to the emission unit. They're not attached to each other. So there was no way to say, well, I have this control and it's going to go to that stack, but I have this other control and it's going to go to this other stack. There was no way to differentiate things like that. But with the new control information the EPA is asking for, that's exactly what you can do. You can better outline exactly how your emissions are flowing. And it's really geared towards, once it's generated, what happens to it. So that's where it started. And then the kind of the years after that, so that was in 2020. 2021, we collected our first set. Now we only did this for some sources because we knew that it was new and we were learning right along with you. So we only picked out the sources that unfortunately it wasn't very clear from the data how their site was configured, and we wanted to make sure that we got it right. So we had to ask them to help us with those. For other sources, it looked a little bit easier. For example, they only had one control code and one stack. It maybe seemed intuitive that we could just say they have one control device. All the emissions are going to that control device and then out the stack. This was especially true for things like low NOx burners, which are inherent to the boiler or turbine or whatever it's on. Everything is going to be affected by that low NOx burner. So that's how we chose to do the 2021 reports. In 2022, we sent them to everybody. And you got back that control information that you had reported before if you had to do it in 2021. And for other sources, you got what we had assumed for you. So we're kind of keep expanding out who does it so we can collect the best information as possible. So that's what we've done the last 2 years. Now this year, once again, it's going to be everybody. So this is going to be starting January 2023. We're going to be sending it to all of our sources again. And you're going to be getting this in an email from info.maers@Michigan.gov, which I know you've heard us talk about lots of times already today. So you'll see that email. If you don't get that email, this is really important that I tell you this, because if you don't get that email and we say they've been sent out, then you need to try and figure out why you didn't get get that email, most likely it's because we have old contact information. So this is another one of those things where updating the contact information on that contact tab in MAERS is really important. This is how we know who to email this to. So things like that are going to help us out. If you're watching this webinar before January starts and you can't edit it in your report, you can also send InfoMAERS an email and say, hey, I'm the latest person for this site. I'm going to need to get all the emails, and we'll try and make sure that you are included on any contact lists. So what is the supplemental control template? We call them SCTs. You will hear that a lot. It's a lot easier to say than the other words, which are really big. So we have made Excel workbooks with multiple tabs. Now, some of these tabs contain MAERS data. We've literally done queries and pulled your MAERS data straight into a site-specific Excel workbook just for your source. Now, this is to help populate dropdowns, and it also forms an easy reference to what you've already reported in MAERS. These are the tabs that are associated with that. So this image just shows just a screenshot of the tabs from the Excel workbook. The dark blue tabs, tabs 1 through 3, are the ones that are very specific to your MAERS information, and tab 4 just kind of goes along with that. Tabs 5 through 6 are for the additional control information. So this is the part that EPA asked for more information about and that MAERS can't handle. So we built these tabs so that we can collect that data from you. They're green, and it is 5 through 8. Now there's also another tab. This is tab 9. It's red, but it's also hidden. So when you get your spreadsheet, you won't see it right away. You can go look for it if you want to, but it's completely locked down. So it's not very helpful for you. It's really more helpful for us because it helps us build the dropdowns and the interactions that are happening within the spreadsheet. It's more for the structure of the spreadsheet than it is for needing to be edited or reviewed. So now we're going to talk about an actual example. I will say that what you're about to see, I'm going to navigate to it in just a second, is we put together, a couple years ago, and then last year we updated it, and then it's being updated right now. It's an example that goes through a pretend facility. So this facility has multiple emission units, multiple activities, the whole shebang, and we give you specific things. We say, hey, look, when you reviewed this, you realized you were missing an emission unit. This is what you have to do to get that emission unit added into the SCT and the tabs you're going to have to work on. So we have those types of things to help people work through specific scenarios. So don't be surprised when you see it. If there's something wrong, it's probably wrong on purpose because we're trying to give you something to fix. Just like with those facilities and MAERS facility training, we want something for you to actually work on, not just have it be perfect right off the bat. So you'll get you'll see on the website, it'll have a write-up. It'll have a pre-filled kind of starter workbook that has some errors in it. And then it'll have an answer key so that you can kind of compare what you've done afterwards. So this is not mandatory, but it does exist out there as a resource for you. And now I'm going to pull it up. So we should be seeing an Excel workbook now.
Yep, perfect.
Excellent. Okay, so I've started zoomed out. I know it might be kind of hard to see, but I wanted to make sure that we started off with you being able to see column H. Column H is on the far right of this tab. I'm in tab 1, and this is going to tell you your facility information. So this is the test facility with a junk SRN, but for your site, it'll have your actual facility name and SRN and address. And that is on the right-hand side of all of the tabs in this document, except for tab 9. So tabs 1 through 8 will all have that on the right-hand side. So these dark blue tabs 1 through 3, and I'm going to run through this pretty quick. If you want a more detailed, talk about what to do in any of these tabs or what to do in this workbook in general, then obviously you should attend the more thorough training that we'll be doing in January. And I know Jen will talk about more of that in a little bit, but I just want to give you a quick overview and point out some of the things people, oopsed on last year and how some of the parts of the workbook might be different. So tabs 1 through 3 are pretty basic. They are your MAERS information. So this one is set up for somebody who does not have any reporting groups. So that is why it is empty here. If you had a reporting group, you would see the reporting group ID listed in the correct line. This is just telling you emission units and their associated either reporting group or control codes. So these are the control codes from MAERS. These are not the device IDs or anything like that. You'll do that in a separate tab in the green section. Same thing with stacks. You have emission units, any associated reporting groups, and the stack IDs. Please note that in MAERS, all stacks are associated with emission units. They are not associated with reporting groups. The reporting group is just kind of the parent that houses more than one of these emission units. So whenever you have a reporting group, you will see it on more than one line because it must have at least 2 emission units in it if this had reporting groups. Tab 3 will just have your activities. So these are your SCC codes and which emission unit or reporting group that they are associated with. So it's kind of the very quick details for the blue tabs 1 through 3 that are MAERS associated. Now, if you discover, for example, that you have messed something up, and maybe it was an error from a previous year, or maybe it's simply that you changed what you're doing and you need to fix something. So you see that, EU Boiler 3, you're like, hey, that's not the right SC. I need a different activity. You would have to go through the process that Jen showed to add the appropriate activity, delete off the inappropriate activity in MAERS, and then you have to let us know through that info MAERS email box that it's not right, and we'll send you an updated version. Now with that though, I would highly suggest that you use tab 4 optional notes and you tell us, and you can see in this example one, we've listed all the things that has been changed in MAERS to go with this book. So, in this case, they added a couple new emission units. So I don't want to move on, but they added a couple new emission units. So those are listed here. And what that does is that when you say, hey, I need an updated workbook, I've filled out tab 4, I'm going to open up this workbook and I'm going to look and I go, oh, good. I know exactly what I need to look for. And I'm going to go and I'm going to find the right information for those emission units. And it helps me make sure I don't miss them when I'm updating your workbook for you. So that's what tab 4 is for. And here's an important thing to know for all of these. I can't edit these fields, they're locked down. So if I try to type something, it's going to give me an error saying, nope, you can't do that. This is protected. That is true for all of the dark blue tabs. There's nothing you can edit on there. In tab 4, the only column you can edit is column A. If you try and type somewhere else, it's going to give you an error. We did this on purpose. This is for data integrity. If you need to make a change to MAERS data, then you need to make the change in MAERS, not just in this workbook. If you have an emission unit ID, we're going to default to the MAERS data first, not to what's in the SCT. So you need to make sure that that information is all correct and then tell us so we can update it. Now, there were some people last year who submitted their SCT and they had made whatever changes they needed to in the green tabs, but they never actually told us that they had updated items in MAERS. And in some instances, that can affect how well your dropdown works. So for one example, I'm going to go to tab 5. This is the first tab where you have a lot more editing capability. You can add control devices and control device pathways. Now these are lists. They are separated by this dark black bar. This is to tell you that these are completely separate lists. They do not need to be associated across that dark blue bar. So this fabric filter that's labeled filter 11 does not have to be associated with this pathway, which is col 5. They can be completely separate. Now, there are some people who did things where they would, I'm going to scroll down, they add a control device, and then they come here and they look and they go, oh, my control device isn't listed. And they say this, and they come over to the comments and they say, this should be dust suppression. Well, the problem is the reason why you didn't have something to put here is because dust suppression isn't in your workbook. And it's not in your workbook because you didn't tell us that you updated something in MAERS and got an updated SCT. This is exactly the type of thing that you would need to let us know so that we can make sure that you have what you need to complete it properly in your dropdowns. Something else that this shows you is that when I added this task 1 here at the bottom, you'll note that nothing got added in column A. And you think, oh, well, I know what it's going to be. It's the next one in line. Well, when I start to type, it's going to error. This is a protected part of the form, and so is right here, column H. These are the AQD IDs, and we will assign them for you. And part of this is to make sure that it's going in sequential order. It's to make sure that we don't overlap. We don't want to have two CD0036s. We only want one of them, so we need to make sure that the next one is 37. This is part of, once again, our own personal data integrity for our unit. So don't be surprised when you can't edit there and you can't add it in. Leaving a blank lets us know that it's a new control device. Now, that also being said, we have seen that some people went, oh, I don't have a water curtain 3. I know, I'll just put CD test 1 in right here, and I'll change this to fabric filter because it's a fabric filter. Well, the problem is that what that's going to look like when we send it to EPA is it's going to look like a water curtain just magically became a fabric filter. And that's not how it works, right? You dismantled the water curtain or eliminated or whatever the case may be. The water curtain's gone. It can't magically become a fabric filter. Now, that being said, sometimes maybe you made a mistake before and you want to fix it. And I actually do have an example in here of that on purpose. So RTO1, you'll see, is not a regen therm oxidizer for the control code. It's a low NOx burner. And it says over here, it's a regenerative thermal oxidizer for the guide code. This is obviously just an error. If it's just an error like that from a previous year, it's okay to make that change. What we don't want is for you to overwrite the data of one control device with a totally different control device. If it's totally different, it needs to be added at the bottom. And then to show that I didn't have that water curtain, what I should have done was type delete. And by typing delete, what'll happen is when we aggregate the data, we'll just do a query that wipes out everything that's delete, and we can get rid of it all in one go for all of our sources. So that is how we want you to get rid of it. And then we'll know for sure that 36, the control code that was 36, is the one that needs to be gone. Same is true for the pathways. If you don't want this top scuff, then you need to write delete over the top of it. And the top scuff is gone, effectively anyway, from our purposes. Now, the thing that also goes with that is when I come to number 6 control device pathway, where I'm putting my pathways and my control devices together. In other words, I'm saying what order the control devices are in within a pathway. What you'll note is that none of these say deletes. And that's because these don't automatically fix themselves. But I believe that the one I deleted was water curtain 3. So if I come down here, I see that I have multiple things to say water curtain 3. I have it here, here, and here. And I also say that. But if I click and I look, water curtain 3 is no longer an option. Instead, what I see is delete. So if I flip it to delete, it's going to become really obvious that that needs to be what happens. You would do that for any of them that show up that way. So they're just gone now. There is no more water curtain 3. And then you can see that the first one was in this T-adsorb 1 pathway. So you can either leave it this way and we'll automatically switch your 2 to a 1, or you can flip that to 1 and we'll know that this only has the one control device in that pathway from now on. So this is how you kind of correct these types of errors. It's really important that you write delete over it if you don't want it. And if it's a brand new control device or pathway, you need to add it at the very bottom. When I come back to tab 6, you'll see that I could have, instead of saying delete for top coat, I could just say CD test and put that in now because it's a new device that I've added and it's right there. So those are kind of the ways that we would like to see you edit it. It makes it easy for us to keep track of what's going on and to make sure that you actually thought about it. What we do not want to see is people like to do this. We've seen where they're like, I don't want any of these RTOs. So they just paste over them. And now we have blanks. We have ones that are completely out of order. If we compare the data from last year, what we'll see is that, what used to be 30 now looks like it's 28, and we don't know why. We don't know where that comparison is coming from. So it's going to look like things have magically become something else, and it's going to change what's in all the pathways. So please don't do that one. We don't like that one. I'm going to undo it because I don't want to see it in the things down the line. So that is how you do that, and editing them and changing them. You are always welcome to add new ones at the bottom. If I had added a control pathway test and I come here, it's going to be at the very bottom of the list, because that list that I'm generating in tab 5 is what's making this drop down. So when I add to that list in tab 5, I'm adding it into my drop down in tab 6. And then I can make both of them. So I just put my control device test into my pathway test, and then I would just need to make sure that I filled out my sequence and my apportionment. Something that has changed from last year is one thing for tab 5. We are now showing you these AQD IDs. We didn't show them last year because we thought you guys won't identify them with them. You're going to want to use the names that you picked out yourself. Well, the problem was that people were doing those copy and pasting, and we're hoping that if you see these AQD IDs, you'll recognize that you're actually changing data alignment when you do those types of things, and it might help you do it better. So we are exposing those now just so that you see them. And over here, we had to change the validation and the apportionment because some people were going too low. EPA does not want decimal points. In other words, something less than 1%. So now the validation has changed. You cannot put in 1%. So if I try and say 0.05 and push return, it's going to give me an error telling me that doesn't work. So that wasn't in there last year. It just made you do a percentage. It's going to be a little bit higher. Now, that being said, if I try and say 0.5 and put it in, it's going to assume I mean 50. So just pay attention to how it's coming out after you push enter when trying to put in a apportionment percentage, because you want to make sure that it's actually doing the number you think it's doing. So once again, I'm not going through how you decide what to do for any of those things. That's what the more detailed presentation is going to be on. This is more just the changes and how things look a little different and how it behaves a little different. So when I go to tab 7, this should look exactly the same, only the validation for the stack apportionment has been changed a little bit. Last year, we said that if you rarely use the stack for an emission unit or reporting group, that you could just go ahead and put 0.01 in. Well, what we learned is that EPA doesn't like that. EPA won't take a stack apportionment that's less than 1%. So we either have to disassociate that stack from that emission unit in MAERS, so make sure they're not connected in MAERS, or you need to make sure that it's at least 1%. Now, some people struggled because they tried to have over 100 entries, and obviously if you split things evenly with over 100 entries, you're below 1%. So we did have to make some adjustments for those sources to make sure that they had 100 or less entries so that they could at least be 1%. But with that, you should really evaluate if they need to be separate entries. For some of them, the pathways were actually identical. They just made like basically duplicate pathways. So we narrowed it down to one pathway and changed how it works. So if you find yourself in that boat, please just contact us so we can talk to you about the best way to fill out your form, because you obviously have a lot going on with that emission unit. But remember that stack apportionment is split for each unique emission unit and activity combination, or reporting group and activity combination. So I don't have to split it for, if you see all of these EU coals, I don't have to split it among all of these because this one is a separate activity. So I just have to find all the activities that are the same and split it amongst those. So that's one of the difference too. Some people were trying to split it based upon stack if they had a stack that was on multiple emission units, but it's not by stack. It's split by emission unit and activity combination, or reporting group and activity combination. So one of the other things I want to show just real quick is how you would effectively change how you report if you get rid of a reporting group. So remember that in MAERS, you just click the delete and the reporting group goes away, but then you have to fix things in the activity emissions section. Well, I presume that in most cases, you're going to put the same activities on those emission units that they had before based upon what they need. So this part probably won't change. You're control pathways aren't going to change, neither are your stacks. So this type of information is still the same for your stuff. You just have to say which emission unit things go to. So and this is just because I know this source, I created this example. I know that this activity that ends in 619 is all for my EU guide code. So all I have to do here on the left is find EU guide code and select it in the dropdown. I'm just gonna, you can also copy and paste. Just make sure that when you're copying and pasting, you're keeping everything in the same cell that it came from. Otherwise, you may break those drop downs. So if you don't feel comfortable that you can keep it in the appropriate cell, you should probably not copy paste, just use the drop downs. And then I can just delete what's in the reporting group ID, and I have just converted this activity to the appropriate emission unit. That's how easy that was to do. Now, some of them, I know that you're going to say, well, not all of them are that easy. And that's true. So I'm just going to do one more example, which is right here. And this is my activity that ends in 013. And for this one, you can see from these stacks, this guide RTO is for the EU guide code, top RTO is for EU top code. But SV oven RTO, what is that for? Now, if you know this example source and you've ever seen the visual for it, what you'll know is that EU guide code and EU top code both end up going to the oven RTO. So how do you split it when it's two emission units? They have the exact same pathway and the exact same stack. How do you split that? Well, I'm going to start with the easy ones because you do. And then EU top code and EU guide code and EU top code get put in over here, but I'm not going to delete this yet because I want to be able to follow very easily all the changes that I'm making. Now, this one has to go to two different sites or two different emission units for the one site. So what I'm actually going to do, now you could do this by selecting from the dropdown. I'm going to very carefully copy and paste, see how I highlighted the exact same number of columns for the row, and I have them in the exact same position. I'm going C to F, and now when I paste, they're all right there, and I didn't break my drop downs because I was very careful how I copied and pasted. So now up here, next to this RG coding, I'm just going to make this one guide code, and this bottom one, I'm going to flip to top code. So now I have everything covered, and I can delete these RG codings. But what I need to be careful of is I have a guide code and a guide code here. So this row and this row, because they're now this emission unit in that activity, need to be split to add up to 100%. So now I need to fix my stack apportionment. So I'm going to make them even, so 50, and then this one's already at 50. And I have to do the same thing for my two top codes, 50 and 50. Now you're going, hey, you forgot to do that for your first one you did, this one. But remember, I switched all of the activity. I switched every single one for this activity to EU guide code. So it actually still does add up to 100%. Only if you're having to add lines or delete lines are you going to end up probably needing to redistribute. But it's always a good thing to check. And remember that in Excel, if you highlight those rows and you come down here, I know it's really tiny, I have no way to actually zoom in on this little itty bitty bar here at the bottom, but it says sum is 100%. So that's a really quick and easy way to check, is you just highlight what you want and you look down here on the bottom and see what it says the sum is. So that's an easy way on tab 7 to change your reporting groups to your emission units. But remember that if you're going to do this, you need to do it in MAERS first, even though you can make this change without getting, without deleting RG coding from your spreadsheet. So I don't actually have to delete RG coding. It could still be there, right, in my options, and I just remove it. But you have to make sure it's in MAERS. Otherwise, we're going to try and report it as a reporting group, and we're not going to know what to link it up to because you won't have reporting groups in here. So if you're going to keep your reporting group, you have to keep it in both places. If you want to get rid of your reporting group, you have to remove it in both places. So those are kind of the big things that we saw happening in tab 7. Now, the biggest change of all, and I apologize for this, but we didn't know about it until we were trying to submit to EPA, but they have flipped control efficiencies to being mandatory, which didn't have a very widespread announcement. We definitely never heard it until we were seeing the errors coming in. So what we did was we, in an attempt to help out, came up with some default control efficiencies, and we added them for effectively as many control devices as we had time to. We added thousands and thousands of records, trying to help everybody out. Now, the way that this is going to work is for this pathway, if I go back to tab 7, so if I'm looking at these are all RTOs, and it's going to say, okay, I'm not going to let you report CPRTO1 unless there's a pollutant and a control efficiency associated with it. Now, it doesn't care if I associate it at the pathway level or if I just have at least one control device within it that has something. It doesn't care which it is, but it does want a pollutant and it does want a control efficiency. So in the control efficiency area, what we did was we said, all right, well, RTOs have VOC and 95% efficiency. This may not be appropriate efficiency for your site. And if that's true, then please give us a better one. And then go ahead and either, put a unique comment for yourself or just delete off the comment that's there. And then we'll know that it's something you yourself are reporting and not just a default that we gave you. Now, I know some of you may be looking at this going, oh, I already spot an error. Yes, RTO1 says NOx at 50%. That's a very specific error. And if you read through the example problem, you'll know why that's there. But for what we put into the data to go to EPA, RTOs did not get NOx at 50%. That's a low NOx burner default. So that's what we did on your behalf. If you want to make changes here, please do. We would love it if you had more site-specific data. Control-specific data is even better. We chose to put things directly on the control rather than the pathway. And part of that is, so for example, RTO3, that's on more than one piece of equipment. It's on more than one emission unit. And the farther down the line that we put this pollutants and control efficiency, the more likely it is to work for more than one pathway. So especially for sites that had, more than one pathway that had a specific control device, if we could put the percentage on the control device, it could work for more things and we would be able to submit more control pathways that way. So that was our goal. But if you really know something at a pathway level, it is okay to come in here and say, well, I don't know what my total is, but I do know that my boiler pathway for, and this is a coal boiler, so my boiler pathway for SO2, is some percent. You are more than welcome to do that. We would prefer that it come in on the control, but if all you know is on the pathway level, then please give us that, because nothing or something is better than nothing. So, and that is kind of the last of the tabs. I know it was a really quick run through. I did want to make sure I got to tab 8. You'll notice it's no longer says optional. It's green instead of yellow, and it will have a lot of defaults in it. So I'm going to switch back to my presentation and finish up here. Do you see that presentation?
Yes.
Yes, good. All right. So what to do with it? We kind of ran through some of it, but the gist of it is you should know what the general structure is. Those dark blue tabs 1 through 3, they should match MAERS. So what you're looking for when you review those are, do they match MAERS or not? And if there's no MAERS changes, then they should match. They should have pre-filled from what's in your starting report for January, right? So when you log in and you see things, which means if you put a dismantle date in last year, that emission unit should already be gone. And it shouldn't be in your tabs 1 through 3. Okay. Now, if you do make MAERS changes, then we ask that you fill out that yellow tab 4 for optional notes, and you email it back to us and let us know that you have either submitted or shared your report and that you need an updated SCT. For the green tabs 5 through 8, these will be matching what was submitted for the emissions inventory 2021. And I word it that way rather than saying that it's the stuff that you submitted to us, because we have done extensive QA efforts on it, and you may find that it doesn't match perfectly. So one of those examples was the people who had too many control pathways. It dropped the stack apportionment below 1%. We had to make changes to submit any of that data. So you might find that, you had 5 dust suppressions, but we changed it to 1 dust suppression just so we could get the data in. So it will be similar to what you submitted, and in some cases will exactly match, but in some cases there are going to be changes that you'll notice, and that's why, because we had to make changes to get it to go to EPA. Now, if you look at it and you're like, yeah, this sounds like my source, then you don't have to make any changes. And if you do decide that there's something you want to tweak, use the drop downs and remember to go in order. So always start on tab 5, then go to 6 and 7 and 8. And if you change something in tab 5, remember that it's going to change the options in the drop down, but it won't automatically change those drop downs. So you need to actually navigate to those tabs and fix those drop downs options, right? Fix the part that showed what you changed. So, and we can't emphasize this enough. If changes are made, so if you make changes in MAERS and you need a new SCT, or you make changes in the SCT itself in tabs 5 through 8, which you can edit, you have to send us back that spreadsheet. If you don't, then we'll never know. And so, or are needed is, really about if you change that MAERS data. So we can't stress that enough. And preferably, please remember any correspondence about the SCT. Ideally, it'll be in replies on that initial email. That'll help us keep track of who you are, what company you're submitting for, what company you're asking questions for. But if you don't reply right on that email, please, please, please include your SRN. Remember, that's the 1 letter, 4 digits, so that we can track down what you're even talking about. And the other thing is that last year, people assumed that by not replying, everything was going to be good. And we kind of told you that. That's true. But we found that we realized we had no idea if people were reviewing it. We didn't even know if they'd opened it or gotten it. So we're not going to go saying that anymore, that we're just going to take it and assume it's good. What we're going to tell you is that if you don't tell us it's okay or provide us an updated one, we're going to be sending you emails as it gets closer and closer to the 15th of March and saying, hey, we haven't received your SCT. Hey, you want to get that to us? You still haven't received something. You may receive a letter at the end of the season, even if you submit your MAERS that says, yeah, but you didn't submit the SCT. So we're still asking for that. So it's really to your advantage to submit it on time by March 15th, right? The same deadline as your MAERS report, and making sure that, we have it, that we know that you've at least looked at it. And it's okay if everything's fine in it and you don't need changes. It's okay to just send that email back that says, for this SRN, it's good. There's no changes needed, because we'll mark you off as completed. We'll know that you did look at it, you opened it, you got the email. But I will say the caveat, obviously it's true, if you ignore us and we still don't get anything and we get to the end and it's time to submit to EPA and you've submitted your MAERS report, we're going to do what we can to get it in the system, which means we probably will use your previous year's data, but we do not want to wait that long. And we will probably prompt you with a lot of emails before that stage. So please don't let us get to that situation. Submit both of them so that we have a complete submittal. And that's it for me, Jen.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. I appreciate you kind of going over all of that. I think that's going to be really helpful for people for sure. So I think what we're going to do now is get to Dennis, because I know we have just have this one more thing that we want to talk about as it relates to MAERS and things like that, just kind of tying everything together. So Dennis, I've got you on your fees slide. So whenever you're ready, go ahead and unmute yourself and you can start chatting.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. I'm Dennis McKean. I'm the fee coordinator for Eagle's Air Quality Division. And Jennifer, you can advance to the slide. For those of you that have worked with MAERS for the last couple of years, if your facility is subject to fees, this may already be familiar to you. In January of each year, the AQD sends out annual air quality fee invoices to about 1,500 facilities. This includes major sources, facilities with opt-out permits, and in most cases, facilities that are subject to federal NSPS standards. The invoices are postmarked on January 12th, so facility fee contacts listed in MAERS should receive them 1 or 2 days after that. These next 2 items are very important. Let's say you decide you need a correction or a change on your invoice. You want to revise your emissions up or down, or you think that maybe your facility's fee category is no longer current. You need to submit a written fee challenge within 45 days. The term fee challenge sounds a little contentious, but it's really quite easy. A written email stating the basis for the change, what you would like to see and why, is acceptable as a written fee challenge. There's a hyperlink there that provides a little more information. You can email that written challenge to either the district staff, or if you don't know your district person, you can email it to InfoMAERS, or you can email it to me, and we'll make sure it reaches the right person. Under Public Act 451, 45 days are provided for written fee challenges. That's very important because after that period, after February 27th this year, the Public Act specifies that we are not allowed to process your challenge. So it's very important that we receive that in timely fashion. 90 days are provided for payment under the Act by April 12th at the latest. 30 days after that, the first monthly penalties of 5% begin to accrue. So there is a grace period, but certainly it's advantageous to make sure your payment's received by April 12th. And we do have more information on fees at www.Michigan.gov/MAERS. If you go to the banner that says annual emission fees, besides that fee challenge link, you'll also see one on fee calculations that shows the per ton rates on emissions, if any, that were reported to MAERS for 2021. It also shows you the different facility charges and who is subject to which facility charge. We also have a new item there this year on AQD policy and procedure, waivers affecting fee assessment for certain source types, and closures of facilities and how that affects fee applicability. These procedures, practices have been used in-house for years as we evaluate fee challenges and fee applicability. So it's not necessarily new, but this policy and procedure doc does take that internal guidance and codifies it and places it in a forward-facing location where external customers as well as our internal users can see it. And if you have any information or any questions on any of this information, please feel free to contact me directly. You can also contact InfoMAERS with questions. And I will say one other item, we do send the invoices out by paper each year, and come mid-January, let's say you're wondering if you've got all your fee invoices in hand. Maybe you have 20 facilities and Bob is responsible for 5 of them, and Bob retired 2 weeks ago. Well, if you think you might not have received all your invoices yourself, then you can either call the phone number on the invoice and Taylor can provide you with a PDF copy of your invoices, or you can contact me directly or InfoMAERS, and we'll see that you get PDF copies of those invoices. So thank you very much, Jennifer. I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks a lot, Dennis. I appreciate you taking the time to go through that as well. I know we do definitely get questions about fees and how they work and when they're due and all of that. So it's just a great thing to be able to go over a little bit. So as we wrap things up today, I just want to let you all know, if you're watching this review webinar, that you can sign up for those other more detailed webinars that are coming up in January, and those are on the screen right now. So those are available to register for as we speak. They are going to be free this year. We're going to be doing 2-a-days again, kind of getting everybody through it in 1 week. That includes myself, Amy, and CJ as well, because we are going to need to get through that too. And like I said before, those will be recorded and you'll be able to watch them later. I know we have a lot of people that like to stop and start with the information. So that seems to actually be really helpful as well. So I know you heard info.maers at Michigan.gov a lot of times. I know you heard Michigan.gov/maers for the website a lot of times. So use those resources. Please reach out to us if you would like to. And that being said, we really appreciate, again, you taking the time to meet with us today, not obviously physically, but watching the review webinar. And I hope that it has been very helpful. So thanks a lot and appreciate all of you.